Now what are the rest of you going to do? You're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. We turn now to the Gospel according to Mark in the first chapter, beginning with verse 29. Now, before I read, because this is Mark, and you're thinking, first chapter, 29th verse, they're just getting going, or he's about to read us a bunch of begats, right? But Mark moves fast. So we are already in the thick of the story in the very first chapter. And the story picks up. As soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now, Simon's mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they had told him about her at once. He came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Then the fever left her, and she began to serve them. That evening at sundown, they brought to him all who were sick or possessed with demons, and the whole city was gathered around the door. And he cured many who were sick with various diseases, and cast out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak, because they knew him. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went out to a deserted place, and there he prayed. And Simon and his companions hunted for him. When they found him, they said to him, "Everyone's searching for you." He answered, "Let us go on to the neighboring towns, so that I may proclaim the message there also. For that is what I came out to do." And he went throughout Galilee, proclaiming the message in their synagogues, and casting out demons. Here ends the reading of the word. May God bless to our understanding this reading. Will you pray with me? O God of grace and love, who loves us even when we feel the most unlovely, we come before you this day, having read from your word. Be with us now as we seek to interpret your word. Guide us and direct us. Mold our minds and our hearts, that the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together might be acceptable in your sight. For you are our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. So we're in the middle of this series, Becoming All God Created Us to Be. Now the problem with the series in February is, of course, things like last week. See, you've now missed an episode. You remember that 3 weeks ago we started with created to worship, and then we talked about being created to pray, and last week we were supposed to talk about created to learn. And there was this little piece of me that said, move everything back a week. But then we would have run into Lent, and that was just not okay either. So I decided that we would move forward and skip last week. So one of the things you need to know is about Rick and his journey as minister is early on I took a preaching seminar from James Forbes. Now, I don't expect you all to know James Forbes' name immediately, but he was the senior minister of the Riverside Church in New York City. A rather big deal in preaching circles. And I took a preaching seminar from Dr. Forbes, and one of the things he said to us was, understand this, and don't you dare hold this against me in a minute. A good sermon can be summarized in one solid sentence or expanded out to 30 minutes and ebb and flow anywhere in between for the time available. Now, generally, I'm pretty kind with you on time, so don't hold that against me. But what you missed last week, the one sentence that I always go through when I'm preparing, that I actually start with my preparation, was, God gave you a brain for a reason. Engage it and use it. Okay, so now you have created to learn. Now we can move forward with our series. See, that was painless. I'm not going to go 40 minutes now and give you 2 for 1. You're welcome. This text in Mark, this fascinating story that if you're anything like me, you have always seen it grabbed onto and preached and examined and studied under the realm of healings. Right? This story we just heard, he enters the house, the mother-in-law's in bed with a fever, and Jesus heals her, and then at sundown everybody brings the sick and those possessed with demons, and he heals them. And then in the morning he goes to a deserted place, and he goes out throughout the countryside and preaches in their synagogues and casts out demons. And when I came across this text, because I do honor the lectionary, and therefore it's a standardized set of readings, and I was praying over it for this week, this little sentence just screamed at me. At the end of verse 31, it says that Simon and Andrew's mother, the fever left her, and she began to serve them. And it intrigued me and gnawed on me and bothered me, because I really wanted to figure out a way to make this sermon about healings being a message of serving others. But I couldn't let go of this sentence. I couldn't let go of the idea that this woman who was just healed, arguably from a deathbed, got up and did the housework. It bugged me. It bugged me because I find myself constantly fighting with the male power images in the Bible anyway. I constantly battle with the notion that the only woman in the story is her role to serve the men. It bugged me. I didn't like it. I read 7 different commentaries trying to find a different perspective. And you know what? Didn't find a one. And that bugged me even more. Why was that necessary? Why was it necessary in the midst of the story? Couldn't have been enough to say Jesus came in, took her by the hand, lifted her up, and the fever left her. Done. That's the miracle. That's what matters, right? So why do we have this phrase? And she began to serve them. I've told you the stories before about Dr. Boring, right? He was my New Testament professor. He also taught me biblical Greek. Talk about a nice combination. Dr. Boring teaching you Greek. Dr. Boring is a brilliant professor and is anything but boring. Nevertheless, I went to my Greek New Testament to see if maybe there was something there. Maybe there was a nugget I could pull out. Maybe there was something. And what I found as I dug into that phrase is, arguably, this could be translated, the fever left her, and she began to function at her full capability. In that old tradition, that meant to serve them. She went from on deathbed to being touched to instantly able to do that which she was, in her mind and abilities, created to do. And that made me a little happier. But not really, because I knew that I was working on a sermon series. And doggone it, I had to get back to the fact that we were created to serve. So I basically spent about 10 hours talking myself out of the theme that is the theme. Now, if you're like me, you should be saying, oh my gosh, Rick, where are you going with this one then? It's okay to think that. Here's where I'm going. in a spiritual journey that seeks to encounter Jesus Christ, our highest and best ability is to do the things Christ called us to do. To worship and to pray. To learn and grow in our faith. And yes, to serve others. How many of you have ever been on a mission trip? Handful, really. That's a pity. That's a pity because mission trips, well, let me put it this way. When I was the regional director for youth and young adult ministries in the Southwest region, that would be Texas and parts of Oklahoma and New Mexico, and was dealing with about 600 churches, one of the things we sat down and worked aggressively on was, especially with middle schoolers, instead of taking them to camp for a week where they run around and chase each other and start their dating lives inappropriately early at church camp, we said, why not take that energy and passion and put it into helping others? And so we instituted these week-long mission trips for that age group to work with and connect to other people in the name of Christ. And in the process, we saw more significant life decisions to be Christ followers than we ever saw with weeks of church camp. Because the thing is, when we reach out to others, when we give of ourselves to others, something amazing happens, right? You know what it is because you've all watched The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. When we give back, our hearts grow. When we give back, that peace of God inside of us expands. I can't count the times I have taken people on mission trips and they say, you know, we'll videotape a story for next year or this and that. And the folks that will say to the camera, I thought I was coming down here to help these people. What I didn't know is what they were going to do to me. Right? When we go and serve, the person who ends up getting served the most is ourselves. And that's because we were created to serve others. God made us want to be helpful. Right? God made us want to engage people in meaningful ways. And when the Spirit that lives inside of you gets energized by that, what a bonus, what a relief, what an opportunity. We were created to serve others. And God is at God's happiest when we are doing so. So maybe instead of railing against this woman's desire to serve when she was healed, we should celebrate the notion that because God freed her to do so, she was able to give of herself completely. On one of those trips I was talking about, we had a group of young people working in and around New Orleans. In the past, when I've told this story, I've changed the names to protect the innocent, but the odds of any of you knowing any of them are so slim, I'm going to tell it with real names. Just no last names. My dear young friend at the time, Austin, was working in a series of activities we had planned for the young people, and it was Friday of the week-long trip, so frankly, he was exhausted. He'd been sleeping on a church floor, showering in a lukewarm spot, had worked in serving lines of a food pantry, worked literally side by side with LVNs in a nursing facility through the week, had been engaged in prayer rounds with a chaplain, and was on his 4th day of service and was in a church neighborhood, low-income neighborhood church preschool. And one of their main jobs that day, honestly, was just to play with the kids. And bless his heart, Austin had kind of hit the wall. And he was sitting on a step. Because that's all he had the energy to do. And this little girl, bless her heart, all cornrows and pigtails, one tooth missing from the front, bounced up to Austin and said, "I know who you are." All of our kids were wearing name tags. He said, "Yeah, I'm Austin." She said, "Nope. I've been thinking about it all week. I've been puzzling over it with my grandma, and I know who you are." Austin, being willing to engage a little, said, "Really? Well, then who am I?" She said, "You're Jesus." "Why would you say that? I'm not Jesus." She said, "Oh, yes, you are. Because there is no reason you folks would come all this way to this neighborhood to play with us unless there was at least some Jesus in you." You are Jesus. To someone this week, you may be the only Jesus they see. That part of Jesus in you that reaches out, that shines forth, that shows people, not so much in words or hard Bible thumping preaching, but in actions, the fact that the love of God is what motivates you to serve other people makes a difference. It changes lives. And if you're not careful, the life it'll change the most is yours. We were created to serve. We were created with a desire to fulfill that part of our heart where God lives and encourage it and give it blood flow and life so that it grows and thrives. And the way we do that is connecting with others. As surely as we were called to worship and pray and study the Bible, a part of growing as a Christian is serving. My admonition for you for this week, friends, is a simple one. Go be Jesus. Or at least be open to it. And let Jesus be Jesus through you. May God bless you in your journey. Thanks be to God. Amen.